Hey everybody, this is Greg. This video that I'm making today is going to be quite personal. It's going to be way more personal probably than any other video that I've ever made. And so I hope that those of you even who watch my videos can be respectful, even those of you who disagree with me. Anyway, even if you disagree with me, please act like adults. Don't just tear me down. Don't tear me apart. Just deal with it. Feel free to say you disagree, but please be respectful. And also, on that note, since I will be saying things that people probably will disagree with, please understand that I don't say this out of a spirit of hatred for anyone. We have this idea these days that if you disagree with somebody, that means you hate them. And if you disagree with somebody's sexual behavior, or if you disagree with a religious practice of somebody, or if you say anything that's critical of anybody at all, then that makes people assume that that means you hate them. And as a Christian, of course, that's not the case. I have my things that I believe, and I very much believe them to be true. But today here it's a little different because a lot of what I'm going to say today is really my opinion. So anyway, thank you for dealing with me with that through that long disclaimer. So anyway, I've been thinking a lot lately about. Lately, I've been doing some research about the way people were in past generations and comparing that to the way people are today. Specifically, I've noticed that the way males interact with one another is quite different today than it was in the past. And even in literature and movies, there's a lot of comments that people make. I mean, when The Lord of the Rings came out, you had Sam and Frodo, and you saw a very, very close bond between the two, and people asked, well, what are they gay? Spock and Kirk, people have said the same thing. Unfortunately, I found that there's YouTube videos a dime a dozen playing off this idea, which I honestly think is quite sad because it doesn't. Why does everything have to become a sexual thing? Not everything is meant to be a sexual thing. So, like I said, I'm not here trying to knock on anybody or anything. But it occurs to me that in past generations, in the 1800s, you'd have two men who would walk down the street holding hands and nobody considered it to be gay. Up until about the 1970s, guys swam naked in gym class and nobody thought anything of it. Whether or not that was appropriate anyway, it might be another question altogether, but people just didn't have the attitudes they had today. They didn't have the fears they had today. I've heard stories from older guys from the 1940s that, back then, guys would go skinny dipping. They would sleep in the same bed. They would readily hug each other, and this was the way people were. This is the way guys interacted, and there wasn't anything gay about it. Abraham Lincoln wrote basically platonic love letters to a friend of his, and they wrote back and forth. And this didn't have the sexual associations that we have today. And so it really makes me wonder, in this world where we've basically torn down all the boundaries, people are very, very quickly tearing down fences. It really makes me wonder, what are the consequences of those actions? As I've heard one speaker say, if you tear down a fence, you should stop and ask why it was put up in the first place. Now, of course, I'm not defending anybody who would actually hate on somebody who considers themselves to be gay. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying it's okay to hate on anybody. As a Christian, I don't believe in hating anybody. But it really makes one ask, what is up with our culture? Up until I had read a story once about a guy who was a kid during the 1940s, and he said back then the idea of homosexuality was considered to be something that was so rare that you'd only ever hear about it in a psychology textbook. And then people started having more of the coming out movement in like the 1970s, and of course that's when a lot of things changed. I grew up as a teenager in the 2000s, and guys were afraid to shower in gym class. But even in like the 80s and 90s, when people were supposedly less tolerant than they are today, people were still having those practices. But so I don't think you can blame everything. The fact that two guys are generally afraid to hug each other, I don't think you can blame that on homophobia. I don't think you can blame guys being afraid to shower after gym class on homophobia. A lot of it is just that there were certain boundaries socially that existed, and they just went without saying, and nobody, thought twice about them. And now things with boundaries being taken down, there's a lot of things that become a lot more uncomfortable. I'm sorry, where people are like, "Hey, I'm not sure about this. I don't want lines to be crossed. I don't feel comfortable with that." And so it really should make people question, what is it that we've done? What is it that we've lost? And not to get too in depth with this, but it does make me wonder, hey, is there a difference with people growing up and seeing other people's bodies of their own gender versus today, when the only bodies you see of other people are in advertising and in pornography? I really think that a lot of that's probably started a vicious cycle of unhealthy body image. Because I picture, hey, a kid growing up, if he's maybe self-conscious about his weight, self-conscious about his penis size, self-conscious about other things, why is it that if he were to see other people, who are like him, his peers, he might say, hey, bodies vary a lot. And hey, he might see somebody who he respects very much who has a little extra belly fat, or who's maybe not super well hung. And he might say, hey, that's somebody I respect, that's somebody who's very manly, somebody that girls really seem attracted to. Maybe it's not so bad to have a couple extra pounds. So it's just, I have just a lot of thoughts along these lines, and it just really seems sad that we live in a culture where you can't even wrestle with another guy without people making a joke about being gay. You can't do anything anymore. I mean, we've come so far away from where we were. I mean, it used to be where these things were no big deal. Guys would go skinny dipping together. Guys would hug each other. They'd wrestle together. They'd sleep in the same bed, and nobody considered it to be a sexual thing. And I think it's really destroyed a lot of the types of relationships that guys were supposed to have. You look at the Kirk and the Spock. You look at the Frodo and Sam. Back in the day, this was the norm. This was everywhere, and it wasn't considered that much of a strange thing. And now people look at it, and they look at it with suspicion, or they want to put a sexual connotation on it, or they want to suspect that there's a sexual thing. So you have your Frodo and Sam walking down the street, and they're just two teenage boys or two young men, or even two older guys, and they just very much love each other in a brotherly way. But then people look at it and they almost want to wink. They're like, is something else going to be going on here? And it's like, then you have that perversion that's put on everything. So, like I said, I'm not trying to drag anybody down. I'm not trying to demean anybody. It just really makes me wonder, as a Christian, what has been happening in our world. I mean, I feel like we're frogs in boiling water. And you know what? You can say that I'm wrong. I'll say that I'm wrong all day. But consider the possibility. Consider the possibility that maybe sin isn't the wonderful thing we thought it was. Maybe throwing away all of our boundaries wasn't the thing we thought it was. And so, anyway, I think I said what I wanted to say here. Feel free to check out my websites. I'll have them up in a few minutes. Feel free to leave me your comments in the comment box. I really want to know what everybody thinks about this. And I know that a lot of you are going to hate that I've said this. Like I said, I know that a lot of you will disagree with me. Like I said, disagreeing with somebody is not the same thing as hating them. Disagreeing with somebody is not the same thing as hate speech. If it were, then I could say that everybody who disagrees with me is a hater. I mean, it's logic. So, anyway, like I said, a lot of this is my opinions, but take it for what it is. This is Greg, out.